What happens when the biggest band on the planet gets torn apart by public criticism? Do they hide? Do they fight back? BTS chose a third option. They answered with raw honesty that left millions speechless. From body shaming to accusations of selling out, these 7 moments proved exactly why ARMY's loyalty isn't blind, it's earned. Here are 7 responses nobody satisfied coming. Number 7, the visual who refused to be just a face. Jin didn't walk into Big Hit Entertainment as a singer or a dancer. He was a film student at Konkuk University in Seoul when a Big Hit casting manager spotted him stepping off a bus near campus and literally chased him down the street. That casting story sounds like fiction, but it's been confirmed by Jin himself and by Big Hit staff in multiple interviews over the years. He was recruited purely on visuals. And the industry never let him forget it. When BTS debuted in June 2013, the Korean music scene was ruthless in its assessment. Online forums, entertainment journalists, and even fans of rival groups singled Jin out as the weak link, the member who was there because of his face, not his talent. The criticism wasn't subtle. Comments flooded Naver articles and fan communities calling him a flower vase, Korean slang for someone who's only good to look at. Dance analysis videos on YouTube ranked him last. Vocal comparison threads dismissed him as forgettable. And when a fancam captured him stepping out of a car in a black suit at an awards ceremony looking by any measure stunning, the clip went viral not as a compliment to the group's talent but as proof of the critics' point. The internet dubbed him Car Door Guy. Millions knew his face. Almost nobody talked about his voice. Here's where most people in that position either crumble or lash out. Jin did neither. In interviews he addressed the criticism with a level of honesty that caught even ARMY off guard. He openly admitted that when he first joined Big Hit as a trainee, he couldn't sing well and he couldn't dance. He said he was aware, every single day during training, that he was behind the other members. He described watching Jungkook, who was years younger, pick up choreography in minutes while he struggled for hours. He talked about staying late in the practice room after everyone else had gone home, running the same 8-count sequences over and over until his body memorized what his brain couldn't process fast enough. But the response that truly shocked people wasn't the admission of weakness, it was the absence of bitterness. Jin didn't blame the critics, he didn't call the system unfair. Instead, he acknowledged that the criticism was in part fair. He wasn't as skilled as the others when he started. The gap was real. But he made a choice. He would close that gap through sheer repetition and effort, not by asking the world to lower its standards for him, and the evidence backs him up. Vocal coaches and music analysts who tracked BTS's discography over the years noted a clear improvement in Jin's vocal technique, breath control, and range from the 2013 debut era to the 2020 Map of the Soul 7 album. His solo song Epiphany, released in 2018 as part of the Love Yourself Answer album, became a turning point. It wasn't a vocal showcase designed to silence critics. It was an emotionally layered pop ballad that required control, dynamics, and the kind of interpretive singing that can't be faked. The song charted globally and became one of ARMY's most personal anthems, not because of technical perfection, but because the story behind the singer made every note land heavier. Jin also weaponized humor, which became its own form of response. Rather than getting defensive about the Car Door Guy label, he leaned into his confidence with a comedic persona he called Worldwide Handsome, a self-given title he repeated at press conferences, award shows, and interviews with such deadpan conviction that it became iconic. By owning the visual narrative on his own terms, with laughter rather than insecurity, he neutralized the weapon entirely. You can't use someone's looks against them when they're already laughing about it louder than you are. What makes Jin's response stand out isn't a single dramatic moment, it's the consistency. Over a decade, he never once publicly attacked the people who doubted him. He never demanded respect. He simply kept showing up, kept practicing, kept improving, and kept making people laugh while doing it. The trainee who couldn't hold a note became the vocalist who performed The Astronaut, co-written with Coldplay's Chris Martin, before a packed stadium in Buenos Aires in October 2022, his solo farewell before military enlistment. The kid they called a flower vase built himself into something the vase could never contain. But Jin's story is just the warm-up, because the next member on this list didn't just face criticism, he was almost erased before BTS even existed. Number 6, the member they tried to erase before he even started, J-Hope. Before BTS existed as the group the world knows today, they were a collection of trainees inside a company so small that industry insiders openly questioned whether it could survive. Big Hit Entertainment ran a pre-debut blog introducing trainees to an early online following, and those early followers had opinions, strong ones. Some of those opinions turned hostile toward one trainee in particular, Young Hoseok, the kid from Gwangju who would eventually become J-Hope. An online petition circulated among pre-debut followers demanding that Big Hit remove Hoseok from the final lineup. The reasons varied. Some felt his image didn't fit the group's hip-hop concept, others simply didn't connect with him compared to other trainees. But the effect was singular and devastating. A teenager who hadn't even debuted yet was being told, publicly and collectively, that he didn't belong. J-Hope has spoken about this period with striking candor. In BTS's 2018 YouTube Originals documentary series Burn the Stage, he revealed that he seriously considered leaving the group during the trainee period. The weight of knowing that a portion of the fanbase actively wanted him gone took a real toll. He described feeling like he was the problem, like maybe the group would simply be better off without him. It's one thing to face criticism after you've built a career. It's another thing entirely to be rejected before you've even had the chance to start. What kept him from walking away, according to multiple accounts from the members themselves, was the intervention of his fellow trainees, particularly Jimin, who reportedly spoke to him during that low point and urged him to stay. Bang Si-hyuk, the founder of Big Hit, also refused to remove J-Hope from the lineup, a decision that in hindsight stands as one of the most consequential in K-pop history. But here's the part that defines J-Hope's response. He didn't just stay, he transformed. Before Big Hit, Hoseok was already a decorated street dancer in Gwangju. He had won a national dance competition and was part of a local dance crew. Dancing was his foundation. But the group's concept demanded rapping, and Hoseok had zero experience with it. So the trainee who was already fighting to justify his existence now had to master an entirely new discipline while carrying the psychological weight of public rejection. He did it anyway. J-Hope spent hours in the studio learning flow, studying delivery, building a rap technique essentially from the ground up. By the time BTS debuted on June 13, 2013, he wasn't just the group's main dancer. He had become a sharp, energetic rapper whose presence on stage was impossible to ignore. And then he kept climbing. In March 2018, J-Hope released Hope World, a solo mixtape that charted on the Billboard 200, at the time making him the highest-charting Korean solo artist in Billboard history. The project blended pop, funk, and hip-hop into something that felt distinctly his own. Critics who once questioned whether he belonged in BTS were now reviewing his solo work in international music publications. But the moment that truly answered every critic came on July 31, 2022, when J-Hope stepped onto the main stage at Lollapalooza in Chicago as a headliner. He became the first South Korean artist to headline a major American music festival. The kid from Gwangju, the trainee a petition tried to erase, was standing before tens of thousands of people at one of the most prestigious live music events in the world, commanding a solo set that drew one of the festival's largest crowds that year. J-Hope's response to the removal petition was never a single quote or a dramatic clapback. It was a decade-long answer written in sweat, stage presence, and chart numbers. He never publicly attacked the people who tried to end his career before it started. He simply made their petition look absurd by becoming irreplaceable. And that patience, that refusal to let rejection define him, is exactly why what comes next hits even harder. Because the next member on this list didn't face criticism about talent. He faced it about his own body. Number 5, the battle he fought against his own reflection, Jimin. Park Jimin arrived at Big Hit Entertainment as one of the most naturally gifted trainees the company had ever seen. He was the top student in the contemporary dance department at Busan High School of Arts, a prestigious program that doesn't hand out that distinction lightly. His movement was fluid, expressive, technically precise. By every measurable standard, Jimin had the talent to be on any stage in the country. But the internet had a different metric for measuring his worth, and it had nothing to do with how he danced. From the earliest days of BTS's career, online commenters targeted Jimin's appearance with surgical cruelty. Korean beauty standards in the entertainment industry are notoriously narrow, sharp jawlines, slim frames, specific facial proportions, and commenters decided Jimin didn't fit the mold perfectly enough. They called him chubby. They dissected his face shape. They compared him unfavorably to other idols. Comment sections under BTS videos became spaces where people casually debated whether Jimin was attractive enough to be in the group, as if his years of dance training and vocal ability were irrelevant data points. Jimin heard all of it, and instead of pushing back, he turned the criticism inward. In BTS's 2018 YouTube Originals documentary, Burn the Stage, Jimin revealed what was happening behind the polished performances. He admitted to extreme dieting, going days without eating properly during their Wings tour era in 2017, pushing his body to function on almost nothing. The confession was delivered quietly, almost matter-of-factly, which made it hit harder. The other members didn't hide their concern on camera. They talked openly about watching Jimin refuse food, about seeing him grow visibly weaker during performances. In one episode, Jimin was shown struggling through a concert, his body pushed to a point where the line between performance and self-harm became dangerously thin. The reality was stark. One of the most talented performers in the biggest group in K-pop was starving himself because strangers on the internet told him he wasn't thin enough. What makes Jimin's response remarkable isn't a single defiant quote, it's the visible, documented arc from self-destruction to self-acceptance that played out over years in front of millions of people. Jimin didn't hide what he went through, he didn't sanitize it for cameras. When interviewers or fans asked about that period, he spoke about it with disarming honesty, describing the psychological toll of reading comments about his body every day and the vicious cycle of restricting food, losing energy, and then hating himself for not performing at his best because he hadn't eaten. The turning point was gradual, but it aligned with something larger. BTS's Love Yourself album series, which launched in September 2017 with Love Yourself, Her became one of the defining cultural statements of the decade. But for Jimin it wasn't abstract philosophy, it was personal therapy unfolding in real time. As the group built an entire world tour and UN campaign around the idea that self-love is both revolutionary and necessary, Jimin was living that message in the most literal way possible. He spoke in V-Lives and interviews about slowly learning to eat properly again, about changing his relationship with the mirror, about accepting that his body didn't need to conform to a comment section's specifications to have value. On December 30, 2018, Jimin released Promise on SoundCloud, a self-composed song that shattered the platform's record for most streams in 24 hours. The song was gentle, almost whispered, and its lyrics were a direct conversation with himself, a promise to stop being so harsh, to stop running from his own reflection, to stay. It wasn't a diss track aimed at haters. It wasn't a power anthem about rising above. It was something quieter, and for that reason something far more difficult to dismiss. It was a man telling himself on the record that he deserved to survive the expectations the world placed on him. Jimin's response to body shaming didn't shock ARMY because it was loud. It shocked them because it was true. He showed the damage in real time, then showed the healing imperfect, ongoing, and honest. In an industry built on manufactured perfection, his willingness to let millions watch him break and then slowly rebuild was an act of defiance more powerful than any comeback line could ever be. But if Jimin's battle was fought against the mirror, the next member on this list fought his war against an entire genre that refused to take him seriously. Number 4, the underground kid who made the whole genre bow, Suga. Min Yoongi didn't dream of being an idol. He dreamed of being a rapper, a real one, by the standards of the Korean underground hip-hop scene that raised him. Growing up in Daegu, South Korea's fourth largest city but a world away from Seoul's entertainment machine, Yoongi started making music as a teenager. He worked part-time at a recording studio, learned to produce beats, and performed under the name Gloss in Daegu's underground circuit. When Big Hit Entertainment recruited him, it was supposed to be for a hip-hop group, something closer to the raw, unfiltered music he'd been making in small studios and local venues. What he got instead was an idol group with choreography, fan service, makeup, and everything the underground hip-hop community considered the opposite of authentic. The backlash was immediate and personal. Korean hip-hop purists viewed idol rappers the way jazz musicians once viewed pop singers, as manufactured products wearing the costume of a craft they hadn't earned. Online forums dedicated to Korean hip-hop dismissed BTS's rap line as a joke, but the criticism didn't stay online. In 2013, just months after BTS's debut, rapper B-Free confronted Suga and RM directly during a public hip-hop event. On camera, B-Free mocked them for wearing makeup, questioned their credibility, and essentially told them they weren't real rappers. The video circulated widely. It was designed to humiliate. Suga's response in that moment was restraint. He didn't escalate, he didn't fire back, he sat there visibly uncomfortable and absorbed it. Some people read that as weakness. They were wrong. Suga wasn't retreating, he was redirecting. The answer wouldn't come in a shouting match at a panel event. It would come in the only language the hip-hop world truly respects, the music itself. On August 15, 2016, Suga released his first solo mixtape under the name August D, Suga and DT for Daegu Town reversed. The project was free. It was also a declaration of war on every critic who ever dismissed him. The title track opened with aggressive, rapid-fire delivery that left zero room for the fake rapper narrative. He rapped about being mocked, about the industry's hypocrisy, about the mental health toll of being attacked from both sides, too hip-hop for the idol world, too idol for the hip-hop world. The mixtape didn't ask for acceptance, it demanded acknowledgement, and it got it. August D was streamed millions of times within days. Music critics in Korea and internationally noted the technical skill, the emotional rawness, and the production quality. Hip-hop forums that had dismissed Suga went quiet, or in some cases started reluctantly conceding that the work spoke for itself. The mixtape didn't erase the prejudice against idol rappers overnight, but it cracked the wall in a way that couldn't be patched. Suga didn't stop there. His second mixtape D2 dropped in May 2020 and debuted at number 11 on the Billboard 200, a chart position most underground rappers in any country will never see. His full solo album D-Day, released in April 2023, climbed to number 2 on the same chart. The kid from Daegu's basement studios was now out-charting the genre gatekeepers who had tried to lock him out. But the moment that hit ARMY hardest wasn't a chart number, it was a speech. At the 2016 Mama Awards ceremony, BTS won Artist of the Year, a category many in the industry had considered above their reach. When Suga stepped to the microphone, he broke. Tears ran down his face as he addressed, without naming anyone, every person who said BTS would never make it. He talked about their company nearly going bankrupt. He talked about being called nobodies from a nobody label. His voice cracked, but the message didn't. They were standing there, they had won, and the critics could revisit their predictions at their leisure. Years later, B-Free publicly apologized. Suga never demanded it. He never publicly shamed B-Free or called for accountability. The music had already made the argument, and the argument had already won. Min Yoongi's response to being called a fake rapper wasn't anger, it was discography. And discography, unlike a comment section, doesn't expire. Now if you think Suga's battle against an entire genre was intense, wait until you hear how the next member responded when the criticism targeted not his skills, but his very identity. Number 3, the weird one who turned authenticity into a weapon. Kim Taehyung didn't fit the idol mold and the industry noticed immediately. In a business built on precision, synchronized choreography, scripted interactions, carefully managed personas, Taehyung was unpredictable. He'd make unexpected facial expressions on camera. He'd say things in interviews that caught even his own members off guard. He'd drift into silence during live broadcasts, then deliver a comment so unexpectedly profound it stopped the room cold. The Korean entertainment industry has a term for people like him, 4D, shorthand for someone operating on a different dimension from everyone else. It's sometimes used affectionately. It was not always used affectionately toward online communities labeled him strange, immature, or attention-seeking. Some critics question whether his quirky behavior was genuine or a calculated act designed to stand out. Others called him unprofessional, pointing to moments at award shows or live events where his expressions didn't match the polished composure expected of a top-tier idol. The criticism carried a clear message: tone it down, conform, be normal. V's background made the pressure even sharper. He wasn't from Seoul or even from a major city's entertainment pipeline. He grew up in Gyeochang, a small rural town in South Gyeongsang province, raised largely by his grandparents on a farm. Before Big Hit, he had no exposure to the idol training system, no industry connections, no blueprint for navigating the intense scrutiny of Korean pop culture. He was, by every standard of the world he entered, an outsider. And that's precisely what his critics wanted him to fix. The message from netizens, from industry commentators, and sometimes even from well-meaning fans was consistent: be less eccentric, less unpredictable, less Taehyung. His response was to be more. V never issued a formal statement defending his personality. He never held a press conference or posted a lengthy explanation. Instead, he responded the way he does everything, on his own terms, without apology. In V Lives and Weverse interactions with fans over the years, he repeatedly returned to a simple but firm message. He wouldn't change who he is to match someone else's idea of what an idol should look like. He acknowledged that his personality made some people uncomfortable. He acknowledged he didn't always fit the template, but he drew a clear line between refining his craft and erasing his identity. The distinction mattered because V backed it up artistically. When BTS released the Wings album in 2016, V's solo track Stigma was a raw, emotionally layered piece rooted in neo soul that showcased a vocal depth most listeners hadn't expected. His naturally deep baritone, unusual in K-pop, where higher registers dominate, became a signature that critics couldn't dismiss as a gimmick. Then came Singularity in 2018, the intro track to Love Yourself, Tear. The performance was arresting. V delivered a contemporary art-inspired solo stage with controlled, expressive movement, and a vocal delivery dripping in atmosphere and tension. It wasn't the kind of performance that comes from following a template. It comes from an artist who trusts his instincts more than he trusts the commentary. In September 2023, V released his debut solo album, Layover, and the project was the clearest articulation of his artistic identity yet. Rather than chasing trends or pursuing maximum commercial aggression, Layover was intimate, subdued, deliberately unhurried, a jazz and R&B influenced collection that prioritized mood over spectacle. It reached the top of the Billboard 200 chart. The album didn't prove V was mainstream. It proved he didn't need to be, and that the audience for authenticity was far larger than the critics ever assumed. What makes V's response to the weird label so effective is that he never fought it. He absorbed it. He let the word sit where people placed it, then filled it with so much artistic substance that weird stopped being an insult and started sounding like a compliment. The eccentric kid from a farming village didn't just survive the idol system, he forced the system to expand and make room for someone it was never designed to hold. But if V proved that being different is a strength, the next member on this list proved something even more unsettling for his critics, that being underestimated since childhood is the most dangerous weapon of all. Number 2, the boy who grew up with the whole world watching, Jungkook. Jungkook was 13 years old when he left his family in Busan and moved to Seoul to become a big hit trainee. 13. Most kids that age are navigating middle school. Jungkook was navigating one of the most unforgiving industries on the planet. By the time BTS debuted on June 13, 2013, he was 15, the youngest member, the one the others called Maknae, the baby of the group. But the internet doesn't care about your age. It never has. From the moment BTS entered the public eye, Jungkook faced a form of scrutiny none of the other members experienced quite the same way. The scrutiny of growing up entirely in public. Every awkward phase, every vocal crack, every moment of teenage uncertainty was captured, uploaded, analyzed, and judged by millions. Other idols debut as young adults with at least some framework for handling public pressure. Jungkook was a child navigating adolescence with cameras documenting every step. The criticism evolved as he did. Early on, it was contained comments about his shyness, his tendency to hide behind the older members, questions about whether he was mature enough for the demands of the industry. But as BTS's fame exploded, so did the intensity of public judgment. The label Golden Maknae, a fan-given title celebrating his seemingly natural talent across singing, dancing, sports, and virtually everything he tried, became a double-edged blade. Every success reinforced the golden image. Every perceived stumble became a headline, because perfection once assigned to you becomes a standard you're punished for failing to maintain. The pressure created a pattern Jungkook described with startling honesty in BTS's documentary content. In Break the Silence, the 2020 docuseries, he talked about watching himself on camera and feeling like he wasn't good enough, despite being one of the most technically gifted performers in K-pop. He described the anxiety of knowing millions were watching him develop as a person in real time, and the weight of understanding that any mistake wouldn't be a private learning experience but a public event. Then came 2020, and the mistake became very public. During the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic, South Korea implemented strict social distancing guidelines. Jungkook, along with several other celebrities, was reported by Korean media to have visited establishments in Seoul's Itaewon district shortly before the area was identified as a major COVID-19 cluster. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Korean netizens, media outlets, and public commentators condemned him. He was called irresponsible, selfish, a bad influence on young fans. Online threads demanded accountability. Jungkook's response was what made ARMY stop and truly pay attention. There was no deflection, no carefully worded excuse designed to minimize responsibility, no attempt to shift blame to the media or argue technicalities. Big Hit Entertainment released a statement confirming his presence in the area and conveying his sincere apology. But beyond the corporate language, the members themselves later indicated Jungkook took the incident deeply to heart. Not because the backlash was loud, but because he genuinely felt he had let people down. In a culture where celebrity apologies are often performative and scripted to formula, Jungkook's response stood out because it carried no performance at all. He accepted responsibility cleanly and completely. The tattoo controversy added another layer. Starting around 2019, Jungkook began getting tattoos, eventually developing a full sleeve on his right arm. In Korean society, tattoos carry significant stigma. Conservative social attitudes toward visible body ink persist, especially for public figures and idols marketed to younger audiences. Korean broadcast networks required him to cover his tattoos with sleeves, bandages, or digital blurring during television appearances. Netizens debated whether he was ruining his image, setting a negative example, or disrespecting cultural norms. Jungkook never went on a public rant about the criticism. He never posted a manifesto on personal freedom. His response was quieter than that and arguably more powerful. He simply stopped hiding. Over time, particularly in international content and his own social media, the tattoos were visible, unedited, unapologized for. He let the ink speak for itself, tattoos that included references to BTS, to ARMY, and to the journey that had shaped his entire adolescence. The boy who debuted at 15 with the world judging every stumble became the artist who performed Dreamers at the opening ceremony of the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar, before an estimated global audience of over 1 billion viewers. That stage wasn't handed to him because of a label. It was earned through a decade of discipline by someone who learned how to be human and how to be famous simultaneously, with no separation between the two. Jungkook's response to a lifetime of public criticism was never a single moment of defiance. It was the slow, visible process of a boy becoming a man while the entire world offered unsolicited commentary on every step. He didn't fight the scrutiny, he outgrew it. And if his story proves that growing up in public can forge something unbreakable, the final member on this list delivered a single response so powerful it echoed through the United Nations General Assembly, and changed what the world believed a K-pop idol could say. Number 1, the speech that silenced the whole world. RM. Kim Namjoon was told he was too ugly to be an idol. Not behind closed doors, openly in online communities, on broadcast programs, in the comment sections that followed BTS from their debut in 2013. Korean beauty standards in the entertainment industry run on mercilessly narrow margins, and the consensus among critics was blunt. RM had the brain and the bars, but he didn't have the face for the job. In an industry where visual appeal functions as a job requirement rather than a bonus, that judgment carried genuine weight. RM absorbed the criticism the way he absorbs most things, by processing it, turning it over, and eventually channeling it into something with purpose. But unlike every other member on this list, RM's defining response didn't arrive through music, humor, or quiet persistence. It came through a microphone at the United Nations. On September 24, 2018, Kim Namjoon stood at the podium of the 73rd United Nations General Assembly in New York City. He was 23 years old. He was the leader of a K-pop group, and he was about to deliver a speech that would be watched over 100 million times and quoted in classrooms, therapy sessions, and graduation ceremonies across the globe. The context matters. BTS had partnered with UNICEF in November 2017 for the Love Myself campaign, an anti-violence initiative aimed at protecting young people worldwide. The partnership was real. BTS donated proceeds from album sales and personal contributions to UNICEF's END violence program. This wasn't a photo opportunity. It was a sustained, financially backed commitment with measurable impact. But the criticism came fast. Before RM ever reached the podium, Korean media and international commentators questioned the legitimacy of a pop idol addressing the General Assembly. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others argued that BTS had nothing substantive to contribute to a body designed for heads of state and policy architects. The implication was the same one that had followed BTS their entire career. You don't belong here, you're entertainment, stay in your lane. RM's speech dismantled that argument in under 7 minutes. Speaking entirely in English, a language he taught himself largely by watching the American sitcom Friends as a teenager in Ilson, RM opened not with achievements but with vulnerability. He didn't recite chart positions. He didn't list awards. He talked about being a kid in Ilson, a suburb of Seoul, who used to look up at the night sky and imagine. He talked about losing that kid somewhere along the way, about how the opinions of others gradually replaced his own voice until he stopped trusting what he thought, what he felt, what he wanted. Then he delivered the line that would define the speech and for millions of people define BTS itself. I had many faults and I have many more fears, but I'm going to embrace myself as hard as I can. And I'm starting to love myself gradually, just little by little. The words weren't revolutionary on paper. Self-love is not a new concept. But the context, a 23-year-old Korean man standing in the General Assembly Hall, a room built for presidents and prime ministers, speaking in a second language before millions, choosing to lead not with power but with admitted fragility, that was unprecedented. No K-pop artist had ever stood in that room. No pop artist of any nationality had ever used that platform to say, essentially, I'm scared too and that's okay. He closed the speech with a direct address to young people everywhere. Tell me your story. I want to hear your voice and I want to hear your conviction. No matter who you are, where you're from, your skin color, gender identity, speak yourself. The reaction was immediate and global. The speech trended worldwide across every major platform. News outlets from the BBC to CNN covered it. And the critics who had dismissed it as a marketing exercise found themselves watching a young man do something none of them had ever been asked to do: speak to the entire world and actually be heard. 3 years later, on September 20, 2021, BTS returned to the United Nations General Assembly, this time as special presidential envoys for future generations and culture, officially appointed by South Korean President Moon Jae-in. All 7 members addressed the assembly, speaking about the impact of COVID-19 on their generation and the urgency of climate action. They weren't guests anymore, they were envoys. The institution that critics said they had no business entering had formally invited them back with a government-issued title. RM's response to a career defined by being told he wasn't enough, not handsome enough, not legitimate enough, not serious enough, was to stand in the most serious room on the planet and prove that substance has never required permission. The kid from Ilson who taught himself English from a sitcom spoke to the United Nations General Assembly and made the world stop and listen. That isn't a clapback. That isn't a comeback. That is a complete, irreversible shift in what the world believed was possible for someone who looks like him, sounds like him, and comes from where he comes from. And that is why Kim Namjoon's 7 minutes at the United Nations will be remembered long after the comment sections that doubted him have been forgotten.